Still have more people coming in, but I'll get started. My name is Lindsay Bressman. I apologize, I have a bit of a cold, but I am Shomer Collective's board chair, and I am joining from Brooklyn, from New York. And I'm so thrilled to be welcoming more than 250 professionals and lay leaders from across the Jewish end-of-life field who've registered for today's convening. Clearly, we are all very passionate about this work, and we know that it's an evolving field, and it's events like this and opportunities for all of us to get together and put our ideas together to continue to imagine what end-of-life planning and the experience of death and dying can be for families in the Jewish community. On behalf of our advisory board, I'm very proud of the work that Shomer does in creating space for so many elements of the field to come together, and also people, in terms of how the Jewish community is evolving. Do people have a Jewish home and synagogue that they're part of, or how are we thinking about end of life in terms of all the pockets of the Jewish community? And this really gives us a chance to spark that innovation. In just a moment, we will share a fabulous video, which will introduce you to some of the individuals who make up this Jewish end-of-life space. I do want to acknowledge one very important voice that we are missing at today's reconvening, and that is Rabbi Melanie Levav, who is the executive director of Shomer. She unfortunately fell victim to that what-if scenario that she talks about and that we always talk about. She was a pedestrian crossing the street and was hit by a bus on her way home from work last Tuesday. Thank God she's okay and she's on the mend. She has some issues that she's addressing and rehabilitating at home with her family. We wish her a refuah shalema and blessings for a complete recovery, and also just honor the dedication that she puts into this work and how life can be so fragile and how important community is. And that's really the driving force of Shomer and the work today. The Shomer team has stepped up in endless ways during this time that Melanie has been home, ensuring that Shomer's programs continue at an exceptional level. Samantha Zellman, who is our intrepid director of programs and partnerships, has stepped up to facilitate us today in the reconvening. She will continue to share more about the Shomer Collective and our agenda for today. So welcome, and keep the ideas flowing and the sense of community evolving. And without further ado, let's celebrate the sacred work in this field.
My name is Lindsay Bressman. I am chair of the board for the Shomer Collective, and I'm also doing training for chaplaincy.
My name is Stephanie Gary. I'm with Plaza Jewish Community Chapel. I'm the executive vice president of communal partnerships here at the chapel.
I'm Rabbi Suzanne Offit. I live in Brookline, Massachusetts. For many years, I was a hospital chaplain and the chaplain on the palliative care team, where every day I would accompany patients and families in their end-of-life conversation.
Hi, everybody. This is Fred Klein. I'm the rabbi for the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, and I run our spiritual care initiative called Mishkan Miami. We train facilitators to engage other Jews in Miami in these kind of conversations, and we run workshops in healthcare institutions. We run workshops in synagogues, or any group that is interested in learning more about advanced planning. And I think this is so important.
I'm Miriam Rabner, and I am an outreach coordinator for MJHS Hospice and Palliative Care in New York City.
Hi, I'm I'm Stephanie Elkins. I am the founder of Be Present Care, where I am a family caregiver consultant and end-of-life doula. I'm also the founder of Death Over Drafts. I'm also a senior outreach advocate. I work part-time at Kol Tikva, which is a Reform synagogue in Los Angeles. And I'm also involved in the Valley Hever Kadisha as part of the Leadership Council.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Adam Levitt. I'm the Director of Program Design and Facilitation at Jewish Studio Project. I get to hold space for people who, like all of us, are confronting some level of challenge or uncertainty.
My name is Lily Sage Weinreib. I am a licensed funeral director in New York City, working here at Plaza Jewish Community Chapel.
I'm Pleasant Salicki. I live in Washington, D.C. on Piscataway land.
Hi, my name is Michael Brook. I live in Toronto, Ontario, here in Canada.
Hi, I'm Shari Haber. My company is Great Goodbyes. I'm a death guide and certified conscious dying coach.
My name is Toby Weiss. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Cultural Diversity for MJHS Hospice and Palliative Care.
Being of service to people is probably what moves me most in the work that I've been doing for 22 years, and elevating the importance and the necessity of end-of-life conversation has not only been a gift for many, but certainly a gift for me.
One of the things I find is that being sick in the hospital for days or weeks on end is very lonely, and you sort of get reduced to the illness that has you in the hospital. So giving people a chance to talk about who they are and what they feel proud of are some of my favorite moments.
After hearing many eulogies, I realized that a lot of stories were being buried. So I decided to start a new business. It's called Time for My Story. I'm very proud of this particular work that we did. This is almost 200 pages, and it chronicles the life of 2 Holocaust survivors, and just really their time during the Holocaust and their movement to Canada. And most importantly, it keeps the memory of people who've passed alive.
This year it has been my absolute privilege and pleasure to help inform and implement the Reform Hever Kadisha. What it means to be Jewish and queer and non-binary and still be treated with the same ritual right and respect is enormous.
As a hospice volunteer coordinator, a hospice volunteer, I work as an end-of-life doula and a grief educator. I love hosting death cafes, and I love hosting death over dinner.
I connect with a lot of individuals and families, and we discuss what gives their life meaning based on traditions, beliefs, values, fun, and relationships. I encourage them to transmit that meaning into discussions about their death, which will happen to all of us. A few years ago, I was very privileged to become acquainted and friendly with a patient who was a Holocaust survivor. He had no family, he had no children, and all the people that were close to him were no longer here. And I realized if I didn't step up to the plate to help him have a proper tahara, rituals for his burial, and a proper kavura, the actual interment, that there wouldn't be a quorum, there wouldn't be a minyan. And we had, thankfully, over 30 men there, and I was able to arrange for someone to say Kaddish for him for a whole year. My experience in knowing him and him letting me in to be helpful changed my life forever. It was a privilege.
I work with individuals, couples, and groups to help them prepare an advanced plan for their whenever death so they could die better and live more fully in the meantime.
Today, my work has taken me to focus on suicide, and I speak to rabbis and communities and families about transforming the Jewish communal response to suicide. The thing I'm most proud of is my work with Jewish and Family Children's Services of Greater Boston with my colleague, Margie Sokol. And we have created a suicide loss bereavement group, and we reach people all over the country.
Just some moments of my work that I truly appreciate is being able to help people reflect on what they want or don't want at end of life, which is such a hard conversation to have. Because family dynamics, grief, and expectations always show up. And with my work with Valley Hevret Kadisha and doing Shmira and Tahara, to be able to be part of that spiritual connection in community.
A lot of pride that one of our volunteers mentioned to me that in his own life he had a conversation with a family member using the resources that we gave him. So we are empowering other people to have these difficult but very important conversations.
It's such an honor and a privilege to be in this community, and I'm really looking forward to another year together.
As you know, I love the work of Shomer Collective, which honors and values the work that I do.
I'm honored to be part of the Shomer Collective.
I am honored to be part of this community that talks about the importance and works together to ensure that we live better lives because we have talked about the end of life.
Wow. Thank you to all who shared your voices, and to Shomer Collective's incredible new marketing and communications coordinator, Victoria Mapson, for beautifully capturing the essence of our field. Shomer Collective's work is about bringing Jewish wisdom to bear on the end of life. We do not do this work alone. Our planning committee has been an essential part of getting us to today, and we are grateful for their insight to make both the pivoted convening in October and today's reconvening happen. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from many of the members of the committee throughout our video and program today. We must also acknowledge the philanthropic foundations and individuals who enable us to do our sacred work. The founding members of our board, the Natan Fund, newer members of our board, and especially our chair, pinch hitting as my co-MC today, Chaplain Lindsay Bressman. Thank you. Shomer Collective was founded on the realization that too many people in our communities end up in crisis about end of life because we don't talk about and plan for it sufficiently, along with the recognition that Jewish wisdom has much to offer to support us at this liminal stage of life. Our mission is to improve end-of-life experiences for individuals and their families, inspired by Jewish wisdom, values, and practices, by curating content and resources and building a diverse network of organizational partners. We envision a world where end-of-life matters are spoken about openly, thoughtfully, and frequently, creating opportunities for many more people to engage with Jewish wisdom, values, and practices. These conversations and experiences can be transformational, having an impact not only on the person who is dying, but on whole family and community systems. Shomer is honored to serve as the convener of today's gathering. We see our roles as concierge, curator, convener, and change agent as we help to empower individuals as they plan for and/or confront death for themselves and their loved ones. We help to make Jewish wisdom and expertise in end-of-life matters more accessible through referrals, teaching, counseling, and curation of learning experiences. And we help to spark innovation and culture change inside and beyond Jewish institutions, so that organizations will recognize that end of life is a life cycle moment that can meaningfully engage people Jewishly. A word about our name. The word Shomer means guard. A Shomer guards the body of the deceased from the time of death until the time of burial, and is the first person who has the honor of accompanying the soul on the beginning of its journey to separate from the body. So too, Shomer Collective aims to provide sacred accompaniment on this journey, serving as a guide. Collective refers to the recognition that we're in this together, that the collective work we do and new ways we will come together is what will make the difference in helping more people in our communities live well in the face of mortality, guided by Jewish wisdom and tradition. We invite you to get involved by attending upcoming programs, such as our signature program, What Matters, Caring Conversations about End of Life, or Death Over Dinner Jewish Edition, where you can train with us to be a facilitator and then lead them in your own community. We also have a resource library on our website and offer concierge services if you or someone in your community needs a referral. You can also hire us to come and speak in your community. Our aspirations for today. These are the values we ask you to hold in mind throughout our convening. First is presence. Show up, be here now. If you're here, try not to be elsewhere on 3 different windows and devices. Kindness, which hopefully is self-explanatory. And last, all voices are welcome. Please be mindful of how much you are talking and make space for others when you're in the breakout rooms. Our intentions for today: to ground ourselves in the Jewish wisdom that supports our sacred work and recognize that we are part of something bigger. To connect to other professionals and lay leaders who are doing this sacred work alongside us, and to generate ideas to spark innovation around end of life in the Jewish world. Before we jump into the content, we want to acknowledge that we are gathering today, reconvening, as we've called it, in light of the change in plans at our original convening that took place in the days after the horrors of October 7th. We continue to mourn the victims and pray for the swift release of the hostages. As we gather anew, we designed our time together, focused on 3 stages of end of life: preparation, transition, and mourning. We recognize that these are not always distinct phases. Many of you work in all 3 of these phases. Thinking about the role that each of you play at different parts of the process, it seemed fitting that this past Shabbat, in the Torah portion we read, we discovered Moses, leader of the Jewish people, burnt out and overwhelmed with lots of demands from the Israelites on him. His father-in-law, Yitro, gives him the same advice that I'm sure many of us have heard in moments like these. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. We, as a Jewish end-of-life field, can share the burden with each other. Together, we can meet the many needs that individuals and families and communities face as they navigate preparation, transition, and mourning. If you take away nothing else from this reconvening, we hope it is this: that Shomer Collective and the others here are all to support one another as we guide people through these challenging times. If you're a rabbi in a community where the Jewish end-of-life needs seem endless, maybe you can connect today with the local Jewish end-of-life doula or a chaplain to support pastoral counseling. Or if you're a Jewish communal leader and you're looking for Jewishly informed mental health support, to address the needs of your community after a traumatic death, we encourage you to partner with the folks you meet here today. There are many ways we can better support ourselves and our communities if we are not siloed, when we seek to collaborate and get support from each other. The 3 even more focused questions we will be exploring today are: communally, how do we best prepare for death inspired by Jewish wisdom? How do we add Jewish meaning to end-of-life transition moments? And third, how do we grieve and mourn Jewishly? San Francisco Jewish palliative care doctor Shoshana Ungerleider says that it's always too early to talk about death until it's too late. So this first question is, communally, how do we best prepare for death inspired by Jewish wisdom? We will hear from What Matters and Ematai. And first, Sally Kaplan of What Matters. How do we get the conversation started?
Thank you, Samantha. So I'm here to talk about What Matters. And for those of you who are not yet familiar with us, What Matters is a signature program of Shomer Collective. And we reach members of the Jewish community across the demographic, geographic, and denominational lines. We are helping those in the Jewish community prepare for death. For a time when confronted with serious illness or end of life, individuals might be in a situation where they're unable to speak for themselves or communicate the type of treatment they would want. So by choosing a healthcare proxy or agent whom they deeply trust, discerning and communicating their values and wishes to the important people in their lives, and completing their advance directives, they can feel confident that their healthcare wishes will be known, respected, and honored. And importantly, What Matters emphasis is less on specific medical treatments than on personal values, preferences, and goals. And we infuse Jewish wisdom into this process. So many of you know this statistic: 92% of Americans say it's important to discuss their wishes for end-of-life care. And yet 32%, about 1/3 of the people in this country, have had such a conversation. So this is the wide gap that we seek to narrow. We do so by following an evidence-based protocol called Respecting Choices, the heart of which is training and certifying advanced care planning facilitators. And they're located in teams throughout the Jewish community in social service organizations, synagogues, JCCs, and seminaries. Our facilitators are trained to guide individuals and groups through the questions they need to ponder in order to complete their advanced care plans. So why do we avoid these conversations? I'm sure everyone gathered here today confronts this question as well, but let's consider for a moment some of the reasons why it is that people avoid having these conversations. First and foremost, talking about our mortality, our vulnerability, life's unpredictability. Is there anything that is more difficult to talk about, to think about for ourselves, and to speak to others about? And other reasons, not wanting to accept your children or your elderly parents by bringing up the subject of illness and death, worrying that those close to us may not want to honor the wishes that we have expressed. There are others who believe they actually have no one to appoint. They're either solo agers or living in isolation, or perhaps they're in an abusive situation where they are not able to choose the person they would want. There's also the fear of that somehow superstition intervenes, that talking about death will bring it on. And then there's those who wonder what Judaism has to say about these matters, but really don't know how, where, or who to ask to access the information they need. And why are these conversations so important? By engaging in advanced care planning, we convey to the important people in our lives what really matters, what makes your life worth living. These conversations can one day be the touchstone upon which decisions about medical treatment for you will be made. To the extent possible, we also have more control over our end-of-life decisions when we engage in advanced care planning and conversations. And we can feel more secure that our wishes will be honored, regardless of the condition we are in. Because for most of us, it is true that we want our lives to end consistent with the way we have lived, holding true to the values and beliefs that we hold dear. So how do we start the conversation? Let's talk both individually and communally. Individually, our What Matters facilitators can provide accompaniment and support so it's not a lonely endeavor, and you have someone who's actually following up and following through with you. We suggest hints and language for bringing up a topic with others who are resistant. We provide guidance in navigating obstacles and difficult choices. For example, which child should I choose, or which friend should I choose to be my agent? So know that What Matters conducts regularly scheduled public advanced care planning conversations, and we invite anyone on this convening to attend a session to learn for yourself more about what we do, and we encourage you to refer clients, congregants, and others to these programs. And communally, it might have first seemed for many people to be unusual to think that advanced care planning can take place in community rather than in a healthcare or medical setting or a legal setting. But there's increasing recognition that communities do indeed play a vital role in educating about end-of-life issues and destigmatizing and normalizing the conversation. We found that people feel safer having these conversations in Jewish community where they're known and supported, where they can more comfortably have these intimate conversations, draw upon Jewish texts and traditions, and where it's natural to talk about values and life cycle events. So if you or your organization are interested in bringing What Matters to your community, becoming trained as a What Matters facilitator, or having us present to your clients or members, please be in touch. And finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote that we feel sums up the meaning of our work, and in fact, frankly, much of the work that Shomer Collective does. People who think seriously about the fragility of life are more likely to focus on things that really matter and live their lives to the fullest. So by facing our mortality, by opening up the conversation, by preparing for death, we'll be able to live our lives, live each day more fully. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. And now I'd like to introduce Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Brody of Ematai, who will explore how do we focus on Jewish wisdom to help people plan.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for that lovely introduction. And Sally, it's wonderful to follow up on your words of wisdom. I think what you said right now is really very inspiring. And I want to specifically address some of the issues that I think are specific cultural barriers that we have in the Jewish community. And I want to start with a story that Ematai used to be known as the Halachic Organ Donor Society, but we've rebranded and expanded. And as you can tell by the name, Im lo achshav Ematai, if not now when. We're trying to help people upstream the important conversations, as Sally was mentioning earlier. And we have a hotline or a helpline that people can call us 24/7. And I got a call about 2 months ago from someone who was in a hospital, and there's a dilemma about introducing a feeding tube as an intervention for the parent that had both advanced dementia and advanced Parkinson's. And as I'm sure you do, the first question I always ask people is, well, what do you think, in this case it was a mom, what do you think your mom would have wanted? And the answer I received, which I'm sure all of you will guess, is we never discussed it. Now, this is someone who had advanced Parkinson's, advanced dementia at this point, but earlier on, of course, it wasn't so advanced. They knew what dementia is, they knew what Parkinson's was, but they couldn't talk about it. And over time, we helped work it out with the siblings. We had a little family meeting, and we figured out a plan forward. But in a follow-up, I asked the family member to call me why they never discussed it. And he said to me, listen, Jews, we don't like talking about these things. It brings upon the evil eye, or it somehow like it will cause our loved one to be harmed, as it were, and therefore we just don't do this. And I said to him, well, where do you get this idea from? He said, listen to me, Shlomo. When I was a young kid, from that time until today, whenever we recite Yizkor, the memorial prayer on the major Jewish holidays, anyone who doesn't say Yizkor walks out. And I learned from there that we don't talk about these things. Now, whatever you want to say about the meaning of that ritual, I think this is a widespread phenomenon that there's certain cultural barriers that we have in our religion which are misinterpreted or misunderstood that will cause people to think that we don't talk about these things. It's sort of the Jewish version of whispering cancer, right? We don't talk about these things out loud. And in general, we're a life-affirming religion. And this has, of course, many different applications and implications and very harmful consequences, as you all know. So I mentioned here on the slide 3 different examples. Organ donation, always a very important topic. Doesn't happen every day, but when it happens, it's literally a matter of life and death. We had a consultation recently where a young person died, unfortunately, at the age of 19. They had signed their organ donor card, but never discussed it with the family members, who were shocked that their family member had signed this card. It was something they just didn't talk about in the family. DNRs, if you don't discuss a DNR, as you know, and you have resuscitation when it's medically inappropriate, it is painful and going to harm a person. And I stress this to people because if there's one incentive that we can get people to start talking about these things is you don't want to have harm done to you. And similarly with regard to burial decisions, I'm sure all of us are familiar with cases like I had recently where family members were disagreeing and ultimately fighting over this issue about where someone should be buried, and people just didn't talk about it and make arrangements beforehand. And so in these conversations, when we're dealing with particularly Jewish cultural barriers, I like to stress to people certain Jewish sources which stress this idea. And I think, once again, it comes from this Mishnah in Avot that I started with, that the name of Ematai comes from. And the Mishnah in Avot teaches us that we have to be, right, we have to think about ourselves. Right? We have to think about ourselves. If I'm not myself, who will be for me? This is important part of a religious imperative, which I bring here in the writings of Rabbi Chaim Falaji in the 19th century, who said people should make their own burial shrouds. Sew them yourself. That's how we do it in Judaism. And I remember I was talking to people about this, and they're shocked. Wait a minute. Won't that bring about the evil eye? Won't that bring about? I'm like, no. Look at Rabbi Chaim Falaji is telling you. This is something that's good for you. And of course, it's also good for your loved ones. We were dealing really recently in the cases in a major city in the West Coast of the United States where Ematai was invited to speak. And the topic we were asked to speak about is the importance of buying life insurance. I said, is that really something you want to bring me out to speak about? And the rabbi there explained to me that in the community in the West Coast, they had 5 cases recently where breadwinners had died very early on in their 40s, leaving behind many, many children, no life insurance. And now we're dealing with a 7-digit budget line, helping them pay for day school tuition and camps and whatnot. And so, yes, we spoke about this. And part of trying to teach here from Jewish tradition is stressing the fact that this is a moral and religious responsibility to confront mortality. And of course, there's all sorts of religious incentives to confront mortality. We see this in our prayers. We see that inspires repentance. And we also understand that there's a financial element, financial obligation as well, in which this is beneficial. And the point I'm trying to get at is that one of our teachings that we try to promote at Ematai, I'm sure many of you try to invoke as well, is to pull out from the Jewish tradition all of these types of sources which teach us the value and religious imperative of confronting mortality. This is something which we need to stress over and over again, because in our community, we have so many cultural and religious barriers of confronting mortality. And yet I think a good look at our sources teaches us this idea of saying that there's a real benefit, practical benefit and spiritual benefit to confronting mortality. And to try to make this really concrete, we don't want to be up in the sky, right, and talking in the abstract. We've tried to create a number of different resources in which we tell people you can't plan where your healthcare journey is going to take you on. You don't know exactly what your nativot, your pathways are going to be, but plan what you can. Plan what you can for you, for your family, and for your future. And part of that is developing a new advanced healthcare directive and conversation guide, which is sensitive to the Jewish community and the needs of the Jewish community. It's called Netivot. It's available for free on our website. It's a legally binding document, the healthcare directive, which is primarily appointing a proxy. And we create a special conversation guide, which we think can be very great use to the entire community, whatever denomination, Ashkenazic, Sephardic, male, female, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, it doesn't matter. It will help people have these important conversations. But of course, there are many other things as well. And what we try to create on the left side here is a list of things. So we try to emphasize to people to keep it concrete. Think about life insurance, disability insurance, advanced healthcare directive, a financial will, family planning, conversations, and legacy gifts and ethical wills. And I believe, and it's my hope and prayer, that the resources that all of us are developing, that we've developed at Ematai and all of us here are developing, will help the Jewish people confront mortality in a meaningful way and address some of the important, not just practical issues, but religious imperatives that come with facing our mortality. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Brody. So now we're going to move into transition. Life's ultimate meaning remains obscure unless it's reflected upon in the face of death. From Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. So our next question is, how do we add Jewish meaning to end-of-life transition moments? And we'll hear from representatives from Kavod Recustom, Jewish End-of-Life Doulas, and Neshama, Association for Jewish Chaplains. And first, we will hear from Sarit Wishnevski of Kavod. How can Hevra Kadishas play a role?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Samantha. I'm the ED, the Executive Director of Kavod. My name is Sarit Wishnevski. I'm a trained end-of-life doula. I'm a member of Congregation Beth El's Hevra Kadisha in South Orange, New Jersey. Kavod is honor, nichum is comfort. And these are two of the core tenets of the Hevra Kadisha. I'm really glad to be with this community today to learn from all of you and to share more about the what and why of Hevra Kadisha and Kavod V'nichum. Before I jump in, I just wanted to take a few seconds to acknowledge the devastating news that flashed across many of our phones and our computers this morning. That 32 of the remaining 136 hostages have been confirmed dead. One of those hostages, who is still hopefully a remaining hostage, is family, Sagi Dekochen. I want to bring his name in. And so for our time today, I want to lean into two offerings from the Hevra Kadisha. One is we show up. It's a lesson applicable to many facets of end of life. And the second is that we do the best we can. So what is Hevra Kadisha? We define Hevra Kadisha as sacred community. These are groups that are primarily made of volunteers who honor the deceased and comfort the living. We can also say that they honor and comfort both the deceased and the living. They carry out the Jewish rituals of tahara, shmira, and more. We are really expansive in our understanding of Hevra Kadisha. Hevra Kadisha used to walk in the front door and be there from Bikur Cholim, from visiting the sick, through Nichum Avelim, through comforting the mourners and everything in between. Nowadays, many of the Hevra Kadisha that we work with really focus primarily on Tahara and Shmira. And we understand that there are incredible opportunities. Rabbi Brody just mentioned sewing your own tachrichim, that there are ways for us to show up in community, in Hevra Kadisha, the sacred community, in so many ways. One of the ways which we think about opportunities within Hevra Kadisha are for the individual. And so I just want to highlight some of the ways in which we show up. Chesed shel emet is often how the work of the Hevra Kadisha is referred to, that this is compassionate kindness of the living for a deceased person, for a decedent. But I may not have just mentioned before, and so I'm leaning into doing the best that I can. Tahara is the ritual washing, dressing, and casketing of the deceased, of a meta, as we often like to say, which is a non-binary term for the deceased, and shmira, which we heard about earlier, which is the ritual watching over and accompaniment of the deceased. For the individual, this is also a meaningful opportunity to engage with Jewish ritual, to find a sense of belonging, to find connection and spiritual meaning in community and in their own practice. The other way that we think about Hevra Kadisha is also for the community at large. Hevra Kadisha really increases access points to the Jewish end-of-life framework. It invites more people to participate, to find themselves in this sacred work. It strengthens the ties between community members and between individuals and ritual. It is hands-on, it is physical, it is spiritual. It helps us to create ecosystems of care. What does it look like when someone in our community dies? Who shows up? How do we show up? What does it mean to be cared for by your entire community? It's also an opportunity to empower individuals within the community, to empower lay leadership and community support, that this is a way for us all to show up. So Kavod v'Nicham, we are nourishing. We are a nonprofit that we focus on North America, so primarily the United States and Canada, and we nourish and grow a movement of progressive and pluralistic Chevra Kadisha, while also increasing the engagement and the awareness of Chevra Kadisha. We are both working directly with Chevra Kadisha, but also working to share this opportunity that this exists as meaningful ritual, meaningful care with the wider Jewish community. We offer ongoing classes, a variety of resources for Chevra Kadisha and the wider community, custom trainings for communities across the United States and Canada, Chevra Kadisha leadership training, as well as a yearly conference. And just wanted to share, I know this will be shared out later, but if you are looking to connect with us, please take a minute and you can use your phone on any of these QR codes to learn a little bit more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarit. And our thoughts are with you and your family right now. In transition to reCustom, focusing on the question, what role can rituals play? And we have Eileen Levinson joining us. Thank you.
I'm Eileen Levinson. I'm the founder and executive director of reCustom, and we're a community platform of meaning and care designed to help you make ritual your own and welcome whatever life brings. And we exist because we know today that many Jews are craving meaning and connection, and yet struggle to embrace and adapt Jewish practices to meet those needs. Spoken a lot with Melanie and Samantha about, people who just need to be exposed more to Jewish options for their end of life care because they maybe weren't planning to engage in a traditional Jewish funeral, and how do they still feel connected to community? And reCustom is a place where we can bridge some of those gaps. We also know that there are many providers out there like yourselves who might be giving care, ritual makers, organizations, and you'd like to better connect your deep knowledge with the thousands of people that can benefit from it. And what we're finding is we just need a new technology and DIY infrastructure to support that. Otherwise, we're seeing gaps. So reCustom exists to bridge these gaps. We offer abundant tools and resources to help people mix the old and the new and remake Jewish rituals in a way that works for them and their authentic selves. And with our accessible, easy to use tools and high quality curated content, much of which we have from Shomer Collective, Jews of all backgrounds can find and create vital sources of connection to Judaism and one another. And so you may be familiar with one of our other sites, Haggadot.com. We started with the Passover Seder and used that as a model for home-based DIY ritual. And from there, our community has asked for more opportunities. And so we've gone beyond holidays on our platform to help people create meaningful rituals and for key milestones and stages in life, from birth to death and everything in between. So what makes a ritual? The building blocks, as you'll see here, are often, purpose, sacred, space and time, and the senses. We think about intention, attention, and repetition. Ultimately, all rituals really help us mark a passage of time, or perhaps honor the rhythm of time, whether it's, the sacred transition in end of life, or honoring the transitions that might go on as we're honoring memory. And rituals can really help us nurture and empower ourselves and help us feel more connected to Jewish peoplehood. So when we take an active role in creating meaningful practices, we can better care for ourselves and one another in difficult times. And so if our rituals have a sense of purpose, giving a sense of thanks, help, wow, things that we're asking out of our ritual, thinking about what we need, helping us create that sacred space and time, often having a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the sensory elements of sight, sound, smells, taste, and touch, all of that helps us build connection and focus on what our lives, gives our lives meaning. So on reCustom, we're all about ritual toolkits. I'm thinking about the building blocks, not just the three main categories of what you need to make ritual, but our Jewish toolkits and toolkits from beyond in our life. And that can be things that we do in mealtime, whether it's cooking or eating together, sharing some gratitude, some symbolic foods. There are so many blessings in Jewish life that mark transition, that mark newness, that mark arriving at a moment. or even just taking a breath or telling family stories. And then obviously there are a number of traditions and customs that we have in grief that we can adapt, such as sitting Shiva, saying Yiskor, lighting a yahrzeit candle, in which we've had a lot of interest in folks who just want to, really deepen that practice and customize it, or perhaps do tashlik. And then, of course, there's things like the music we listen to. In addition to Jewish melodies, there are, pop music, folk songs. We can write letters, poetry, think about movement, how we adorn, how we decorate. And so we hope that we can all use these tools together in the community platform that we're building. So ultimately with reCustom, we want to work together to help you design rituals for different stages of the end of life process, the planning, the transition that is often so fraught with uncertainties, and the memory and the memorial. And when you think about all of the pieces that you have in your toolkit, the wisdom that we have in our broader community, and then the basic building blocks that we need to hit, we can really come to some really meaningful moments that we can make together. And so I want to give you the offering as you're thinking about, customizing rituals, making rituals to mark this transition. Just wanted to give you a few moments to consider what you might do. Imagine you're reaching a milestone birthday dinner. Who is there with you? What foods might you enjoy together? How might you express your core values and wishes? All of that can be represented in with ritual, with symbols, with the senses, with moments of transition. Or if you're in grief, imagine you are at a Shiva for a loved one. What blessings might you want to send to the person who died? How might you bless this moment when the loss is fresh? Or imagine that you're at a memorial. Imagine it's the first anniversary of the death of a loved one. How might you create sacred time for remembering them? Are there sensory elements that you associate with your life? So our goal is obviously, the more that we are able to create and adapt rituals with one another, the more that we can lift each other up in creating those ritual moments, the better vocabulary that we have and the more empowered that we feel as we connect to our Jewishness in these sacred moments. So want to leave you with some next steps. You can, we really want to hear from you with how you're customizing rituals. So please share your rituals with us. This summer, we're going to be having a much broader platform where you can sign on by yourself and also share more content. So for now, you can email us info@recustom.com. You can also explore the beautiful content that Shomer Collective has created in partnership with us on our end of life section. And please follow us on social media for more updates. And we look forward to inviting you into our community further and celebrating your voices on our site. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eileen. And now Zoe Goldblatt from the AriYael Jewish Healing Center, representing Jewish end-of-life doulas.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you. Eileen, that was so inspiring. I cannot wait to connect with you. This is wonderful. I'm here to represent the Jewish end-of-life doulas who have been brought together by the Shomer Collective. We are a wonderful nationwide group. I'm going to start by highlighting a quick story from one of the other doulas in our group. Her name is Ilana Trumbull. And she's a Jewish Buddhist doula and a licensed acupuncturist. She often attracts Jewish clients to her acupuncture practice. One of her clients was from a Jewish background, but was deeply committed to a Zen Buddhist practice. As this client progressed through her terminal illness, she asked Ilana to be her doula. She specifically chose Ilana to help hold the Jewish elements of her identity, and together they pinpointed the Shema prayer as meaningful to her for her end of life. She asked Ilana to lead the Shema prayer with the family at the deathbed, and that's what happened. So who are doulas? Often these are people who have themselves experienced a deep or significant personal loss at some point in their own lives. Some of us are retired or even active social workers, nurses, chaplains, clergy members, and most of us are a little bit of all of these things. we kind of cross those boundaries. And that's one of the magical things about being a doula. A lot of doulas have had very unique life experiences that brought them to this work. And what we all have in common is a very deep and spiritual sense of presence with the people that we're working with. We, at the same time that we have these varied backgrounds that are so valuable and cross over into different aspects of Jewish life, we also know what our boundaries are and when to turn to these very specific professionals when our clients are in need of those types of things. So there are back and forth referral streams between doulas and Jewish agencies. Jewish service organizations might want to refer some of their clients to a doula when they start to realize that their client needs more, needs additional support, whether it be emotional support or logistical support, that they just can't provide that level of support. And doulas, in turn, refer their clients to Jewish organizations when their clients are in need of certain things like residential care, a funeral home or funeral service, a Hevra Kadisha, or a chaplain or rabbi. I'm going to tell another brief story about my husband, Rabbi Dan Goldblatt, who's been a congregational rabbi for 30 years. He was recently called to the home of some very elderly, dear congregants in their 90s, I believe, and they said to him, Rabbi, we're ready to talk to you about end of life. What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing to plan for this? We know it's coming. And he was able to sit with them for 2 hours or more in their home, and he knew them and had this very personal relationship with them over decades. And they were able to really drop in immediately and have this wonderful conversation. And then at the end of it, when he left their home, he said, and now you should talk to my wife, Zoe, who you know, who's an end-of-life doula, and she'll help you from here carry out all these things that we've talked about tonight. Well, I think that couple is very lucky. And we all know that there's so many unaffiliated people who don't know who to turn to and don't know who to ask. And doulas can help fill that role, especially for secular Jews. It's often very helpful, or interfaith families. So please help us spread the word that doulas exist. The Shomer Collective has a growing directory of doulas nationwide who identify as Jewish and have cultural competency to work with Jewish individuals and families. End-of-life doulas, like birth doulas, are there for clients from the beginning to the end to advise, support, educate, and comfort. Doulas are known for having stellar listening skills and time. Jewish doulas are special because they have Jewish cultural awareness and especially awareness of Jewish generational trauma that often resurfaces at end of life. It can manifest in different ways, but we recognize it. We recognize that anxiety and those things that are coming up for people, even sometimes when they don't. We understand that not all Jews practice the same Judaism, and we provide a Jewish presence at every stage of the dying process. And we also can inform people about what's there for them. All these things we've talked about today. We tell them about all the rituals that they may not know about, the prayers, all the beautiful things in the Jewish tradition that they can choose from. We never impose anything, and we work with the person where they are. So if you are a doula, or you want to be one, I urge you to join the Shomer Collective's monthly doula meetups on Zoom, which are wonderful, and to be listed in their directory. If you are interested in finding a doula or meeting or talking to a doula for your own knowledge or for a client, please check out our directory. And if you'd like to reach me for any further questions, I'm reachable at the AriYael Jewish Healing Center online. I'll put it in the chat. Our Jewish Healing Center was created to be an essential support for individuals and families responding to illness, loss, and all life transitions. We are proud to be working with the Shomer Collective, hoping to put together a future training for Jewish end-of-life doulas. And we have an array of programs to offer all groups, agencies, and communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And now, Rabbanit Alissa Thomas Newborn of Neshama. How can we better utilize chaplains?
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you, Zoe. That was really beautiful. And I'm privileged today to be here to represent Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains, also called NAJC. Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains is the international board certifying organization for professional Jewish chaplains. We provide the gold standard in certification, training, education, professional support, and chavrashaf to our members. As Samantha mentioned, I'm Alissa Thomas Newborn. I'm the president of Neshama. I'm also a chaplain working at New York Presbyterian Columbia, and I have a congregation in Teaneck, New Jersey as well. So what exactly is spiritual care? What does a chaplain do? So I think what we've heard so far from all of the fantastic presenters before me is that there's a lot of overlap in some of our disciplines and being able to be present and support patients, clients, community members, and their families at the end of life in this transitional moment. Spirituality is defined by the Journal of Palliative Medicine, is much more broad than people realize, or than certainly we think of when connected to any religion or faith. Spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. So within these parameters, the role of what a Jewish chaplain can do is quite expansive. We're there to have supportive conversations around meaning and purpose, help provide connectedness or facilitate connectedness to the moment, self and others, nature, and significant and sacred. So it's a very expansive role that the chaplain plays. So building off of that, specifically in the context of end of life, because chaplains are serving in various forms of care, but end of life is certainly one of them. And it happens all the time where a chaplain shows up and someone says, "Oh no, am I dying?" Because the association with chaplains is sometimes exclusively end of life, but we're there much before the actual moment of actively dying. And we're part of that preparation too. Specifically, though, in the context of end of life, EOL, spiritual support is primarily in the form of medical decision making for someone who's, let's say, living a halachic lifestyle and needs to have halacha inform, Jewish law inform their practice, as well as meaning making, which builds off of what I was saying before. So just to give you a quick example, often I find myself translating for the medical team what exactly a family's values are. And what we might hear, certainly from Orthodox patients, but it spans the spectrum, including non-Jewish patients. But when we're thinking about our Jewish population, sometimes there's a desire for miracles, or what Rabbi Brody mentioned earlier. Sometimes there's a situation where a family just does not want to have that conversation because of the ayin hara, the evil eye, or feeling that they're not going to be able to handle it, or it's going to bring on death. So being able to translate for family and for the medical team what exactly the values are is very important. Sometimes that's miracle thinking, in that someone will say, "I just am waiting for a miracle." And the staff says, they're not being realistic. But really, when we ask, what would a miracle look like? Using our curiosity as our spiritual care tool, a miracle could look like everyone standing at the bedside being able to say goodbye to their loved one, opening your eyes one last time, getting to hold my loved one's hands as they take their last breath. So this could be miracle thinking, it could be halachic decision making, it can also be grief support following a patient or family member's passing. And just to highlight the end of life rituals as well, of course, a Jewish chaplain is there to make sure that when there are rituals that need to happen in a hospital setting, in a long-term care facility, in a wider community setting, that vidui, which is the end of life prayer, is said as it's needed, that the Chaver Kadisha are called as they're needed for the Tahara, that there's questions about a gosei, someone who's actively dying, what do we do and how does the medical team handle the body, and advocating for those Jewish needs. So how do we contact a Jewish chaplain? We can make referrals at our local hospitals, at our skilled nursing facilities, at our long-term acute care facilities. There's usually a chaplain involved in one of these facilities, and being able to get a Jewish chaplain may be an option on the team. It also may be that that organization contracts out a Jewish chaplain. We can also make referrals to community chaplains. There's many Jewish chaplains who are community chaplains who have the ability to come in and visit, especially when we have members of communities that are not actually associated with a specific synagogue. They may not have a rabbi that they would contact, but the chaplain is there. Creating opportunities for the integration of chaplains into Jewish communal networks and organizations, such as the Federation. There are many positions that are, especially in the following October 7th, there's a realization that there's a great need for Jewish chaplains to be providing support in some of these liminal spaces where otherwise others may not have the professional skill set to step into. So being able to recognize the role of the chaplain and when to call is also very important. And of course, you can contact Neshama, Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. Our executive director is Allison Atterbury, and she's wonderful. Her email address is here. You can always contact us and we can make a referral as well. So we greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and advocate for each of our roles in providing support, comfort, presence, and a Jewish touch from the Spirit in these transitional moments. So thank you.
Thank you, Rabbanit Alissa. And now as we move on to Mourn, according to Ecclesiastes, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. And so our last question, how do we grieve and mourn Jewishly? And we'll have representatives from the Blue Dove Foundation and the Shiva Project sharing with us today. First, Carly Coons of the Blue Dove Foundation. How can we consider mental health needs?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here with you today. I am a licensed social worker and the Director of Education and Programming at the Blue Dove Foundation, where we focus on mental health education in the Jewish community, really thinking about how can we eliminate the stigma around mental illness and addiction through providing opportunities for education and learning. And as we're considering mental health needs, as we're grieving and mourning Jewishly, one of our mental health needs, one of our values came to mind. It's sort of a 2-for-1 value, chesed u'gevurah, balancing loving kindness and discernment. We know that after a death, there is nothing that we can say or do that will fix the situation. And so as we're thinking about our mental wellness, both of the person grieving as ourselves, as the supporter, we can think about what does that look like for us to be present, to show up, to openly listen, to actively listen and be present with the people we're around, while also knowing that we need boundaries, that we need to make sure we're also caring for ourselves, and knowing when we need to tap out to take care of ourselves and when we have the capacity to tap in and care. So this is sort of the framing that I've been thinking about throughout today, as we've been hearing so many incredible people share. So this question of where's this overlap of grief and mental health? How do they interact with one another? You know, we don't live in two bodies. Our physical health and our mental health are all within this one vessel together. First is acknowledging that grief is a normal experience. It can feel really unusual as we are experiencing it because it is very challenging. And unlike society sometimes leads us to believe, we don't ever just get over it. What we learn how to do is integrate it into our lives and understanding that grief will change us, that who we were before might not be who we are after a death. And what does that process look like? Losing someone does impact our mental health. It changes our normal. It shifts what we are doing and how we are interacting with the world. And the one beautiful thing that I think, well, there are many beautiful things, but I think one particularly beautiful thing about Judaism is the number of traditions and things that we have set out to support us through those first 30 days, through that first year every year after, there's sort of a guideline that we can follow if it's something that resonates with us. I think in particular with the increase in deaths related to suicide and overdose, and as we continue to navigate the situation in Israel and Gaza, it is really important for us to think about trauma and how that is impacting our grief. Trauma affects everyone differently. We have different responses to it. We experience it on different timelines, and losing someone to a traumatic death, perhaps a death out of time, one that we didn't anticipate, or even just losing someone as trauma is happening around us, as the situation in Israel and Gaza continues and we are here and perhaps we've lost someone, it can really exacerbate our grief and make it more challenging, and make it challenging for us as supporters to even think about how do we show up and support while also needing to care for ourselves. And sometimes I think as the people who are doing the supporting, we sometimes forget about ourselves in this equation. And I want to invite us to think about secondhand or secondary trauma. You hear those terms used interchangeably. And then secondhand trauma is this understanding that you do not need to experience a traumatic event directly to be impacted by trauma. Hearing about it, reading about it, seeing images online and in the news can be enough to cause secondhand trauma. And the symptoms that we experience are just as real and significant as if we had experienced it firsthand. And in the same way, we would graciously care for people who are experiencing trauma response, we also want to do that for ourselves and think about how do we support ourselves as well. One of the resources we've created in this last year was in partnership with Shomer Collective. And one of the sort of central pieces of this guide to supporting individuals through traumatic death is this concept of circles of support. And it looks pretty rudimentary as we're looking at it here. But one of the things that I think is so important is for us to look at it now so that when we are the griever or we are the supporter, we kind of have this in our mind already. As we're thinking about sort of who falls into these circles, that person in that center circle and that number one spot is the person who has immediately lost someone. That second sort of circle is us, right? How are we supporting them? How are we leaning in to support them? But then who are we leaning out to get support from? And knowing that this dichotomy of leaning in and leaning out is so important. It's that balancing loving kindness and chesed and gevurah, right? And leaning out so that we have the boundaries that we need to feel cared for. If you are interested in learning more about this, we have tons of resources. But three I wanted to highlight is first, in the guide to supporting individuals through traumatic death. These are also all in the resources that Shomer has sent out. We also have a whole section on suicide, suicide prevention, thinking about mourning after suicide. It's an incredible resource, as well as a lot of stories. Our Quieting the Silence platform allows individuals to share their lived experience with mental illness and addiction. And there are lots of ways to stay engaged with Blue Dove. Again, these are all in the resources that Shomer has sent out. We have our resource library where you can take our resources, download them, and use them however you'd like. We have workshops that we facilitate, and we're always looking to partner with incredible organizations and individuals. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carly. And lastly, we have Chloe Nassau from the Shiva Project, exploring how do we revive Jewish mourning rituals.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm Chloe Nassau, and I'm a consultant with Shomer Collective. I'm working on the Shiva Project. And I just want to share this beautiful quote from end-of-life doula, Birgitta Kassenbaum, before we dive in. Shiva offers a beautiful container. We are actually held in place and encouraged to turn toward our pain while being supported by our community. So over the last year, we explored the current state of Jewish grief and mourning in hopes of reinvigorating these ancient rituals and frameworks. We essentially know Judaism offers a roadmap for mourning period, right? Carly, you alluded to this earlier. We have Shiva, we have Kaddish, we have Shloshim, the 30-day marker, we have Yahrzeit, at 1 year. And we have Yizkor, which Rabbi Jen Gubitz likes to call a quarterly check-in with your grief. And we wanted to understand, like, what's the landscape? What are people doing? Are they engaging with these activities? Are they not? So what we did was we talked to people. We did over 100 hours of conversation, about 80 with interviews with Jewish end-of-life professionals, and we gathered stories from around 50 focus group participants nationwide. And we learned that those who have deep connections to their institutions, their synagogues, their faith communities, or their community at large, felt like they had the tools and felt held and supported. Yet, for the most part, for those who didn't have access to these communities, they felt like they didn't really know what Jewish mourning rituals were all about. I also noticed that the landscape of how and where we live has changed. We don't live necessarily in the communities where we grew up or are burying the important people in our lives. And yet there's appetite for innovation. Just like we heard from ReCustom from Eileen, people are looking for these tools and these frameworks. So what I did was, after having all these conversations and all this data, I created 3 personas or composites where you see on the screen right now. The personas are designed to reflect the depth and breadth of Jewish experience. In the interest of time, I'm just going to give you brief examples of who might fall into these categories, and you can go deeper into the report on our website. So we've got Max. This is the last minute mourner. I think this is the category that a lot of people fall into, although you could fall into any of these categories at different times in your mourning process. So this is the person who has very little preparation ahead of time. Someone dies, and there's a ton of logistics you have to do. And Max may want to do something Jewish, but they have no idea where to find it, who to contact, a lot of confusion around what the mourning rituals are, might not be sure like what questions to even ask, which is why it's so incredible that we have this convening and all these people here today, because now we can direct people accordingly. Then we have Dylan, the disenfranchised mourner. And what I mean by disenfranchised is that either they're disenfranchised from the Jewish community or the death disenfranchised them in some way, whether it was a homicide, suicide, addiction. They just feel like they don't have community or language. This might be someone who may not see themselves represented in the broader community with fewer resources that represent their customs. They might not feel like they have a belonging to an existing Jewish communal space, or they might have a rupture with the community of origin. And then also I want to bring up, they might feel financially boxed out of Jewish spaces. And lastly, we have Lou, the lonely griever. And this is perhaps not the direct mourner, but what systems are in place for them? I'm thinking about a non-immediate person, like the best friend, your chosen family, a grandparent, mourning for a grandchild. What are the Jewish rituals and frameworks that we can help integrate that grief and have that grief be witnessed, which is something David Kessler always likes to talk about, the need for grief to be witnessed in community. Lou also might not live in close proximity to their friends or family or to the deceased, and or they might have grieved alone due to the impact of COVID. We're going to be keeping all these composites in mind in the coming year, because we're going to be working on a project to really help center these stories that I heard, to help create more lines of access to more individuals and families, and to really think about how these ancient rituals and frameworks can help them as they go on their grief journeys.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you to all of our presenters.